Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you are in this wacky, wild world that we live in. Um, welcome to another esoterical live stream. I'm gonna hang out, do some Q&A. We'll talk a little bit about some channel news, upcoming class, and stuff like that. But yeah, first and foremost, let me say Happy International Women's Day. For all the women watching or subscribe to the channel, supporters of the channel. You're incredibly important to the history of Western esotericism, even though you don't, women do not get the credit they rightly deserve, and they don't get the coverage they deserve. And so, one thing that I've been very happy to do on this channel is really make sure to look back to the history of Western esotericism to really get into some of the more important women that who often their voices don't get heard or were actively suppressed and are actively suppressed. So I'll be putting up a little thing on the community tab once the live stream's done. But I have a whole playlist, folks, of just episodes about women in the history of Western esotericism. And so I'd highly encourage you, if you haven't checked out some of those episodes, to do that. It would be an excellent way to both do some esotericism stuff, but also to celebrate International Women's Day. It's by learning a little bit more about the women that are so important to the history of Western esotericism. If there is a particular woman that you're interested in me covering, let me know in the comments or in the chat. Again, this channel doesn't really cover 19th century stuff so much, so we don't cover 19th century and up, but there are still tons of women from the history of Western esotericism that I still want to get around to covering, including some women alchemists. Women are very poorly represented in alchemy, and we do know of a few Renaissance, specifically Renaissance Italian alchemist women. And so I'm looking forward to covering some of those, like Isabella Cortesi is an example. Insofar as she existed, there's some doubt about whether she existed or not. That she might not be, but she might not have existed. But regardless, she is still an alchemical character. But we've covered Maria Hebrea and Cleopatra the Alchemist. So I really want to get more women into the world of alchemical voices. But yeah, we won't probably cover Blavatsky. Blavatsky is just way too late. She's way into the 19th and 20th century. So at least for the channel, probably won't be covering Blavatsky. Not to say she's not incredibly important. She obviously is. But that'd definitely be something more on the terrain for Dr. Angela Puka and her channel, Angela's Symposium. So if you're interested in more 19th and 20th century stuff like that, that would be good to cover. Yeah, Anat, I think actually would be a cool goddess to cover. In fact, yeah, Anat is a one that I want to cover, specifically the interesting connection at the Elephantine Island, where we have a mention of Anat Yahu, some kind of combination of Yahweh and Anat, which we don't know much about that, but it's interesting. And it's worth really pointing out. It's worth really just digging into that a little bit. And of course, that whole Elephantine Island Judaism is super interesting. So, but yeah, more women to come here in Esoterica. And like I said, if you haven't checked out the playlist, that would be a good thing to do. I'll throw the link up on the community tab once I get done with the live stream. I probably won't cover Deon Fortune just because she's so recent. Again, this channel doesn't really cover 19th and 20th century stuff, or 21st century stuff for that matter. So, it's just too late. It's just too recent. That's why we would never cover Wicca. We never cover Wicca, not because it's not important. Wicca is incredibly important. It's just too recent of a religion to count as what the kinds of stuff we would cover on the channel. So probably won't cover her, but I bet you, like I said, Dr. Angela Puka will at some point soon. So I would tune into her channel. I don't know if I consider Hildegard being an esotericist, but I definitely would consider her worthy of covering on this channel. She's a mystic for sure, and the mystical tradition has been much maligned and since the Enlightenment. And in that way, she's kind of become esoteric, whether she was or wasn't in the past. So that'd be a thing worth covering. And also just her physica, her medicine, and some of her scientific works, I think, are really interesting. In addition to her works on her mystical works, which are obviously fascinating. Um, so get a couple of other questions here. Hey, James, I'm glad we were able to finally get you into one of these live streams. I know there was a bit of confusion about how all that worked, but I'm glad we were managed to get that to work. An expert 19th century esotericism who might know why the Golden Dawn changed the geographic orientation of the elements from the Aristotelian system. That's a great question. I know a couple of people who might know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. Like I said, I don't really work. I don't work so much in 19th century stuff, but that's a great question. I don't know the answer to it, but I know a couple of people who might. Also, for folks who, I don't know if you folks know this, but Ronald Hutton is giving a talk about the foundations of the Golden Dawn. Just I saw an Eventbrite. I don't know where I saw it. Maybe on Reddit or something, on the occult subreddit. But apparently, Dr. Ronald Hutton, who's just a goat. I mean, he's just one of the best. Again, there's like a top 10, top 5. Ronald Hutton is just an amazing scholar, a wonderful guy. But he's giving a talk on the Golden Dawn. So I bet if you asked him during that lecture, he probably could give you an answer. But I hate to tell you that I'm not expert enough to tell you. So apologies there. Just like not really do the 19th century stuff so much. Thoughts on Jason Rezza-Trajani? I will tell you what I think about him. I was invited to a conference to give a talk, and he was co-invited, and I disinvited myself because he's going to be there. So that is what I think about people who hang around with Richard Spencer. So no, not a fan. All right. Grab some other questions. They're popping up. I guess I'll say a little bit about the recent content on the channel. The last bit of content we've been working on the channel, I've had a lot of fun, and I have to say, and I'm sure you guys could tell it, was getting to interview and hang out with Professor Lawrence Principe. I mean, he's just such a kind person, and not just is he just an amazing scholar, but he's such a kind person. And I have to say that just being able to sit down and interview with him and talk with him was a real honor for me personally. He's sort of an intellectual hero of mine, and I'm sure I hope it came across in the interview that I have just a tremendous respect for him, and it was just so great to be able to hang out with him. And what an honor that I have the ability through this channel to get to kind of hang out virtually, at least, with some of these incredibly important scholars, but also he'll lecture, and he'll lecture, of course, to incredibly prestigious audiences at the Smithsonian and things like that. And what's really amazing about this is I can give him a platform where he can reach 20,000 people in a conversation, and 20 gets 24,000 views, and a lot of people have good access to him in a way that I think it's really great. So for me, I'm so blessed, and I feel so incredibly thankful that I get to connect both worlds, that I get to hang out with people like Professor Principe, and also that I get to make his work more accessible to a wider audience of people, because what else could I want as a educator than taking the high level people in the academic world and then connecting them to a broader audience? So that was a lot of fun. And also just doing the episode on John Rupsisha was just a hoot. John, his fantastic prophecies and stuff are just amazing, and he has this amazing life story. So I'm absolutely, it was a lot of fun to make that episode. Also to do the episode on the Knights Templar. I don't know what it is about the Knights Templar that makes people go completely crazy. It's like they crack open a book about the Knights Templar and they completely lose their mind, as if history just doesn't really matter, and you can make up whatever you want to make up. So, and I've often found it very confusing why that we actually do have an important historical mystical text that underwrites the existence of the Templars, and for whatever reason, people just completely ignore that. I don't know what it is that that makes people want to make the Templars like be crazy in all these kind of ways, historically speaking, and not just own up or acknowledge the fact that we actually have a real mystical connection via Bernard of Clairvaux. I don't know if it's just that Bernard of Clairvaux is just not sexy, like his name Bernard. Maybe it's just like not sexy enough, or maybe he's Catholic and that's too normy, or something like that. I don't know what it is about it that he just gets kind of thrown under the bus of all this pseudo history that goes on with with uh with the Templars. But at any rate, I think again, I think it was just really great to be able to go back to the Templars and show, look, there is a mystical connection to the founding of the Templars, and it is interesting. And we do have all of this, very important material in Bernard Clairvaux, which also I just want to return to Bernard's mystical works later, just because he's such an important mystic. In fact, one might even argue that Western mysticism is all derivative of at some level from Bernard. That he inherits a tradition of someone like Pseudo-Dionysius, and his the way of contemplation, the way of humility, and the way of love basically form the foundation in a really important way for almost every form of mysticism that will emerge in the aftermath of his enormous output. You're talking about the 3,500 pages of text. So, um, so it's just he has such an enormous part to play in the history of mysticism and the history of esotericism, that it's unfortunate that I think because he's Catholic and because there's such a robust anti-Christian bias in the world of esotericism and the occult, unfortunately, which again, like, I don't understand why there's this anti-Christian bias. Well, I understand it in the sense that people get really hurt by Christianity and therefore they react in a kind of trauma response, and so everything Christian is bad. Which is, to me, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Trust me, Christianity I have a lot of bad things to say about the history of Christianity, but I think that when we throw the baby out with the bathwater, we really lose important people like Bernard of Clairvaux. And also, I think even more dangerous in that is that when we do that, throw people like Bernard out. This is just sort of a canceling history thing, which I've already made it really clear how absolutely horrible I think the idea of canceling history is. It's an act of astounding stupidity, and the idea that you can cancel history it's such a entitled, narcissistic thing that boggles my mind. But what you do with that is, if you do that and you don't understand someone like Bernard of Clairvaux, I don't know that you can really understand the development of mysticism and esotericism in the Western world. I think it deeply uh, distorts how these things develop, because you don't have this foundational understanding of where a lot of this stuff came from. And so, to me, I focus on Christian mystics not because I'm on Team Christianity, or I'm trying to be an apologist for the great horrifying crimes that have been done in the name of Christianity, and there are a great many of those, of course. But I'm fundamentally interested in rescuing the important mystical and esoteric elements of Christianity from that, and to think that we can still appreciate them. So, at any rate, that's a long rant to say I enjoyed doing the episode on Bernard and on the Knights Templar, and I'm going to come back to Bernard later, because I do think that several episodes on him would be of great benefit to anyone interested in the history of mysticism. And of course, the last episode we did on the channel was this great episode on the kavod nistar, the hidden kavod, and the unique cherub circle. Um, the unique cherub circle is just fantastic and super interesting. A very niche, very obscure part of the history of the Kabbala, and it was really great to get into that stuff. It gave me an excuse to go read Joseph Don's incredibly dense book on the Karuf HaMayuchad. And again, I just like reading through these texts because they're grappling with philosophical problems that haven't fundamentally gone away. And I think that the more that we see how different peoples at different times have given answers to those philosophical questions or theological questions, depending on how you want to frame it, I think we only get smarter by really getting a good sense of of how to think about those kinds of things. So I really enjoy those episodes. I really love digging deep into that stuff. And Yeah, it was a fun episode to make. And Joseph Don's an amazing scholar, and it's always an honor to be able to grapple with his scholarship. Oh, I do have an announcement to make about an upcoming class, but I'll do that like an hour in. So if you want to hang out for about an hour, I'll have a new class that's coming up, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. But let me scroll up and grab some questions, because that's what folks are here for, or at least that's what some folks are here for. Let's see here. This is a great question from Genghis Galahad. Yeah, the not created but emanated thing. It doesn't inspire the Nicene Creed. The Nicene Creed obviously comes way, way, way earlier. But I do think there is an important, there's an important parallelism here, and I don't want to say parallelism because I don't want to say there's a genetic connection, but I think there might be, and I think that the genetic connection is I do think that that a lot of Jewish mysticism, what became Merkava mysticism, and then eventually what became the Kabbala, and Christianity emerged from a matrix of Jewish bitheism. I do think that there was an esoteric form of Judaism that embraced some form of Jewish bitheism, the so-called two powers in heaven heresy being probably the chief manifestation of that. And I think the idea of being people being transformed into angels or into divine-like beings, of which there were other candidates in Merkava mysticism, like the transformation of Enoch into Metatron. I think that legend and that matrix, at some level, is what ultimately gave rise, to some degree, to Pauline Christianity, the kind of Pauline Christianity, especially we see in Second Corinthians, and a little bit definitely in Second Corinthians. And I think it underwrites a lot of what goes on in Merkava mysticism and in the Shior Koma mysticism. And I think that's why Maimonides has such a negative reaction to it. I think that's the whole point, really, of the Guide to the Perplexed, is to really take on Merkava Jewish bitheism and really destroy it. And I think he did temporarily, and then Kabbalah raised it right back again in a certain kind of way. So at any rate, I do think that they're related, and I do think there is a genetic connection, but I think it's very tenuous. But yeah, it's another thing I'd like to speculate about more, maybe in another episode or something. Have I ever had a mystical experience? I have had a mystical experience, or a few. I just happen to believe that mystical spirit experiences aren't veridical, so they don't. Any noetic content is not veridical, or its veridicality can't be established with any certainty. So I think mystical experiences are very important to the people that have them, and I think they're basically useless for everyone else. So, but I have a whole episode on mystical experiences and the epistemology and philosophy of mystical experiences, if you want to check that out. Thanks. Halfway through a master's inside of your podcast on Agrippa. Nice. I'll have more to say about Agrippa in just a little bit. Just a little bit. Hey, Nick. Say thank you for happy birthday. Thank you. Yep, I have not done an episode on St. Francis. I will, because one of the things we've been dancing around for weeks and months now on this channel, and really for a couple years, are the spiritual Franciscans, and how the spiritual Franciscans really were, to my mind, I think the most dangerous heresy to ever occur in Catholicism. We have the Cathars and the Valdensians and the so-called Gnostics. There was never a chance of them actually threatening the church. Never. The Cathars, if they existed at all, but the spiritual Franciscans and the Franciscan movement, I think, could have rocked it to its very core. And I think that is why the church was absolutely horrified by the Franciscans. And I think that's why they had to make a deal with them and basically bring them in. And the Franciscans, of course, like you said, they've transformed the church. There's a Franciscan Pope now. Unimaginable at some level in different points in history. So yeah, I think that St. Francis is a super important guy. Super important guy. Yeah, definitely worth working on. All right. Yes, the next episode on Paracelsus actually is going to be about Paracelsus and his pharmacology. So yes, your wish will be granted. The next episode that I'll do on Paracelsus will be on the Paramirum. We just did one last year on the Paragranum, and the next one will be on the Paramirum. And that's the Paramirum and the Paragranum are the two fundamental theoretical documents that really underwrite the Paracelsian shift in alchemy. I would argue that they're the most important books that Paracelsus wrote. And so we'll be taking a look at the Paragranum, or rather the Paramirum next time, which is his book on pharmacology and what we might call medical hermeticism or medical alchemy. So we'll get to that in just a bit. All right. Some funny comments about the Knights Templar. I probably won't do an episode on Manichaeism just because other channels have done that. Let's Talk Religion. My colleague Philip Holm has done a great episode on Manichaeism. We just don't. This channel just doesn't do big episodes like that. We don't do like what is Kabbala. What we do is a 14-hour deep dive into Kabbala. We don't. I'm not going to do an episode on what is Gnosticism, because frankly, there are other channels that cover introductory material like that, and they do a fantastic job, like Philip and Andrew over at Religion for Breakfast. And this channel is about really granular, really esoteric, really like hyper specialized stuff. So we just, I think there are other channels that do that great, and I don't need to do that. And so, if you want a great episode on Manichaeism, go check out Philip Holmes. Andrew over at Let's Talk Religion for Breakfast might have one too. I'm not sure, but any sources they recommend are going to be fantastic. So definitely going to do that. That's not, yeah, like I said, it's too big. This is not an introductory level channel. We don't do introductory level material here, and most of what we do is pretty granular, pretty like microhistory stuff. So I'm going to keep up with that. Yes, I do want to do a lot of episodes about Jenner Bruno. In fact, I was just reading Bruno. He's right here in the pile of things that I was looking at. Yeah, there he is. I was actually just looking at the new Black Letter Press edition of his books on Bruno's books on magic, especially the De Magia. So, and the book on binding. Those are also important books on magic. So I was looking at those just recently. But yes, I do want to do a series of episodes, maybe a whole series just on Bruno. But part of the reason why I haven't done any Bruno yet, there's two reasons. Well, they're kind of the same reason, is that you can't do things on Bruno until you've gotten a good grasp on Ficino and Pico. And so until I get some episodes on Ficino and Pico, which I want to do those, I would like to collaborate with Dan Trell, the modern hermeticist, because he's an expert in those. I want to get a foundation of Renaissance Hermeticism and Renaissance Neoplatonism, because without that stuff, there's no making sense of what Bruno's up to. And so Bruno, outside of a deep understanding of that material, doesn't really work. And so it's really important to get that material in first. So yeah, I've also been reading some Ficino as well recently. Yeah, I need to do an episode on his 3 books on life. So yes, definitely an episode coming up, but not yet. What is the direction of thought after post-structuralism and post-metaphysics? Make a 2-channel modern philosophy. No, I definitely won't be making an episode on that. I don't like post-structuralism. I'm just not. I'm a structuralist. I'm a really very old school. Somehow I'm 85 years old when it comes to philosophy. I'm very much a structuralist. I've never seen the need to go beyond structuralism. I have a hybrid metaphysics of a certain kind, but yeah, also I don't buy post metaphysics. I find post structuralism to be nihilism. It's just nihilism writ large. Whether it's Foucault and other Derrida, I just don't. They're clever and I think they're important, but I think that all of that post 1968 philosophy is just living in the shadow of the failure of 68, and living in the shadow of the failure of 68. It just sunk into intellectual nihilism of a certain kind, where everything became relativized, and I just don't have philosophically. I'm very much opposed to that. I'm not a relativist when it comes to truth. I'm not a relativist when it comes to ethics. So I'm very I don't have a lot to say positively about post-structuralism. I think some of them are geniuses. Some of those folks, like Deleuze, they're real geniuses. But I think that again, when you abandon, I'll give an example of this. One of the things that Deleuze loves to do is go back to history, to the history of philosophy, and misread philosophers on purpose. He admits to this. I think he even refers to it as buggering them. He's intentionally misreading them, and he does it in a really clever way. But the amount of people who I've met who've read, for instance, his book on Spinoza, which is the least messed up. Um, the Leibniz book is a total mess. But people go read Deleuze because they want to be fashionable, and they read this intentional misreading of Spinoza or Leibniz or whatever, or Nietzsche, the terribly translated Nietzsche book. Um, and they end up totally misinterpreting Spinoza rather than just reading Spinoza. And I think that stuff is clever for academics to do with other academics. But when that becomes like a earmark of how to do philosophy, something's really gone wrong. It's really gone off the rails. And I follow that with Foucault and his notion of genealogy and history. I feel like that's a betrayal of actually doing history as a science. So yeah, I don't have a lot positive to say about post-structuralism, and frankly, I'm glad it's going away. I think it's still in the ivory tower in some language departments and in some places. I think it still has some power, but I'm glad to see it finally being buried. We will be better off when post-structuralism is a memory. Yes, I think so. I think you can cite a podcast in a master's dissertation. You should ask your advisor what they think, because your advisor matters more than what I say, because they're the one marking you. But I think in general, as long as the information is reliable, and I hope my information is reliable, I think you're allowed to quote any source. But check with your advisor and see what the best practices is there. Mithril. Yeah, it is easy to get bogged in some of this material. I feel like I get bogged down in this material. But I will say that this is can be a tough channel to follow. I don't make it an I don't really make it introductory very much. I assume a lot on the part of the viewer, and yeah, that is going to make it sometimes more difficult to follow. And what I say is, it's incredibly admirable of you that even though some of the material you may not get it at first, that you keep up with it and try. That's a real honor to me, and I want to say thank you for that, for doing that. But also, it's a real honor for you that you put up with me maybe not articulating myself the best, or me not expressing myself as clearly as I could. And insofar as I have those kinds of failures, and I'm sure I do, everyone does, I appreciate you having the patience with me, because I do hope that I do believe that the material is worth it. It's intellectually and spiritually worth it. And so I really appreciate the kind words. All right. Okay. Wow. Okay. Thank you, Nick. Once again, trying to bribe you into do an episode on Eastern Orthodox mysticism, hesychasm, and yeah, I just don't have any background in the East, just none. I think I don't know the last time I read some of the Eastern Fathers, so I just don't have. My background is entirely Western. It's all in the Latin tradition. It's shocking how bad my Greek has gotten over. I used to have pretty good Greek. Now it's just awful. I just don't work in the Eastern tradition. At least as far as Christianity goes, I'm very much a Latinity guy. So, yeah, I just would not be able to make an episode that would do it justice, just because I don't. I don't have the ability to do it. And I think you might mean the Essenes, the hesychasm and the Essenes. I don't know there's ever been any evidence to indicate that there was any influence of the Essenes outside of Judea. In fact, other people around that time don't even mention them. For instance, the Tanim, the rabbis that wrote the Mishnah, never mentioned the Essenes, and even the mentions that we do get in Josephus and Philo, they're third hand at best. Josephus knew some of them, it seems like, but it doesn't seem like they had any influence. They were tiny. They were monastic. They didn't even follow the same calendar as everyone else. They were weird with their weird Enochic kind of Judaism, and so I don't think that they were highly influential. I don't think they had any influence. I don't think they had any historical impact. I know people reach hard to try to have them have some connection with Christianity, but I think there's virtually no evidence of there being any impact of Christianity. And aside from the fact that they're both kind of in an apocalyptic milieu, but I bet a lot of people were in apocalyptic milieus. In fact, even where Jesus grows up there in the Galilee, it's far away. You have to remember that the Galilee was cut off by the Samaritan zone during Jesus' lifetime, and the Samaritan zone basically created a cultural difference between Jews in the north in the Galilee and Jews down in Judea and in Jerusalem. They're significantly culturally distinct. In fact, so distinct that their dialect of Aramaic was recognizable. This even occurs in the New Testament. But the Galilean Aramaic is somewhat different than the Southern Aramaic. And so they were culturally and linguistically distinct. And recall, the Essenes are primarily down way out in the Dead Sea. They're very culturally diffused from the early Jesus movement. So I don't think there's any, and I don't think there's very, I don't know of any evidence, and I doubt that there's any impact between them and the Eastern Orthodox Church. But again, I think that Philip's done an episode on hesychasm. I could be wrong about that, but I think Philip at Let's Talk Religion has done an episode on hesychasm. So you may want to check out that. Right. Oblates of Lectio Divina. Well, can you help distinguish the difference in ancient syncretism and modern perennialism? I guess I'm not quite sure what you're looking for here. I mean, ancient syncretism was just sort of like things like the Interpretatio Graeca, the idea that all the gods are kind of the same and you can kind of link them up with Thoth and Hermes and things like that. And then, of course, there's magical syncretism, where there's a lot of different religious elements being used in a magical environment. I mean, I guess modern perennialism, I'm not an expert in modern perennialism because I don't do work on modern stuff. But I mean, I guess that there's some overlap between syncretism and perennialism, I suppose. I mean, perennialism is the belief basically that all the religions have an inner esoteric, they all share an inner esoteric core. Did the ancient syncretists believe that? I don't know if they believe that it all shared an ancient sort of esoteric core, but I do think the ancient syncretists definitely some level believe that all the gods were to some degree culturally fungible, that that the gods were that they all were the same set of the pantheon and they all kind of shared the same pantheon, which of course is rubbish. That's not true at all. The Celtic pantheon and the Egyptian pantheon couldn't be further from each other. There's totally different cultural systems between Afro-Asiatic religion, and of course the ancient Egyptian pantheon is composed of several pantheons that have been merged together over the long history of the ancient Egyptians, and the Celtic pantheon somehow downstream of the older Indo-European, so they're not at all similar or related. But I will say that they tried to shove all those pegs in those holes, and they kind of fit if you kind of squint and look at it sideways. I think perennialism kind of does the same thing, frankly. I don't have a lot of truck with perennialism. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure how to distinguish them, but I would say that they're distinguished in the sense that one is interested in showing how the gods are the same cross culturally, and there's the magical side where you can do a lot of syncretism and magic, but modern perennialism is a distinct kind of idea that the exoteric elements of all the religions actually they share in common an esoteric core. But I don't think that was a belief held, to my knowledge, in the ancient world. Maybe some of the Neoplatonists would have believed something like that. Maybe. But I've never seen that articulated as such. All right. Right. Wow, there's a lot of super chats. Let me try to get to some of these. Don't want to leave people behind. Thank you, Paul. Have I seen and can give you feedback the 2011 Polish film about Jacob Frank entitled To Us? I haven't seen it. I didn't know there was a movie about Frank. I hate Jacob Frank with a passion. It's one of the he's one of the characters in religious history where my ability to be academically detached just doesn't work. I viscerally hate him. If I could ever travel back in time to just to beat someone's ass, I would travel back in time and I would physically beat Jacob Frank with my bare hands until he was no longer moving. He was I think, positively evil person. but I have not seen the movie. No, but I'd like to see it. Like see how they depict him. I'd love to there be a Shabbatites V movie. I could be an extra in the Shabbatites V movie. Um, I don't know who would play who. But no, I haven't seen it, but I would definitely like to. That's neat. I'll look it up. Look it up. Das, for folks who don't know, Das is the Ashkenazi pronunciation of Da'at. And Da'at was the religion that Shabbatites, no, not Shabbatites V, the religion that Frank invented, or the system of belief that he developed. Whatever. Yamach Shmo, Jacob Frank. Yamach Shmo. Yeah. Thank you, Astrology Strategist. Thank you for the super chat. Let me just make sure and grab some more as we're going. The other thing I saw Dune 2 yesterday. I don't know if other folks have seen it, but definitely go see it. It's really amazing. I was really blown away by it. It's just a spectacle. Really worth seeing. Yeah, I'd love to. It'd be cool to do a philosophy of Dune episode with someone. I don't know, like Quinn's ideas. If you're not following, if you're a fan of like Dune and stuff like that, Quinn's idea is one of the best channels for that kind of stuff. Wonderful stuff. Yeah, the weird symbols in the middle of Oxford manuscript. If you can send them to me, James, I'll look at them. In fact, I've been looking at the Bibliothèque Nationale 7337 this week, because that's what'll be the episode for next week. Is this is one of the first examples of a piece of Astral Necromancy. It's actually one of the earliest necromantic manuals we have from Europe that actually is written by someone who claims to have written it. So I was looking at that. It'll be the subject of next week's episode. So we'll be looking at some medieval Astral Necromancy next time. So we'll look at that. But yeah, you can send them to me. I can see what I think. Mihai also might be able to decipher them too. Romanian scholar of grimoires. He might have more expertise. Would have more expertise on that than I would. You mentioned once that though you're somewhat disposed toward the Enlightenment has been somewhat misunderstood. What are the main ways it's been misunderstood? Yes, I'm very disposed to the Enlightenment. I would consider myself a child of the Enlightenment. I'm very pro Enlightenment. I don't have much positive to say, frankly, about the Romantic reaction. I don't really care about Romanticism. Don't like Romanticism at all. I think the main way it's been misrepresented is just that it was sort of like a like rationalism only. That it was just sort of radical rationalism and nothing else. I think it's a lot more complicated than that. I think also a lot of the elements that came out of the Enlightenment sort of get thrown under the bus, like rights. Like that's the thing that people claim to have, rights. That's a totally Enlightenment idea. So I think that a lot of people, it's like technophobes that are post about how evil technology is on Reddit. It's a lot of people, they poo-poo on the Enlightenment all the while enjoying all the great things the Enlightenment provided. Now, I do think there are problems with the Enlightenment. Adorno and Horkheimer illuminate those problems with the Enlightenment very well. For instance, the Enlightenment conception of nature is horrible. There's a disastrous theory of nature, this purely the idea of instrumental reason as applied to nature, as Horkheimer and Adorno point out, was a titanic mistake. And I think it's part of the reason why we're living in the kind of climate change we're living in now. But my worry is that, again, it's a baby in the bathwater thing, that people, because of the failures of reason and because of certain failures of the Enlightenment, throw away Enlightenment values. And I think that's a titanic mistake. And so I would want to very much hold on to those Enlightenment values and really put at the center of things like reasonability, things like the ability to compromise, things like the ability to engage in tolerant conversations about deeply held topics that really matter to us, like religion or politics, without killing each other. And so those values I treasure. And so in that way, I'm very much, and again, Esoterica is an Enlightenment project. It's all about making ideas accessible. Now, I think people like Voltaire would have laughed at most of these ideas, and maybe they should be laughed at. I don't know. But it's not for me to judge that. It's my job to provide the education and make this stuff accessible. And to me, that's entirely an Enlightenment value. And so even esoterica, as much as the actual content may not be amenable to certain kinds of Enlightenment values, this project is very much informed by my understanding of myself, as seeing myself as a child of the Enlightenment. All right, grab some more. I would be good at Jeopardy. Probably not. I'll be good at esoterica Jeopardy. Nihilism with more steps. That's a great way of putting it. It's nihilism that's incomprehensible. um, it's a funny one. What's my favorite Nine Inch Nails album? It's interesting you asked that, because my brother and I were just talking about how the Downward Spiral turns 30 today. So anyone out there who's looking to feel old, the Downward Spiral just turned 30 today. So that's a thing. I think my favorite Nine Inch Nails album is the Fragile. I'm a big fan of the Fragile. So, the Sacred Rage of Music Speak to You. I think that I live in a headspace that's incredibly cerebral. I live very much in a very mental headspace that's highly cerebral, and music's a place where feeling is the operative thing, right? And so music, I listen to a range of music, and that, things like Nine Inch Nails or black metal, whatever. They give me a place in which to feel feelings that otherwise I think I probably wouldn't feel. So in that way, they're highly therapeutic. I think this is true for many people. This is not a very interesting idea, but that therapeutic aspect of listening to angry or dark or whatever music, I find that to be cathartic, in sort of a classic Aristotelian sense. So yeah, it's very cathartic for me. I think that's true for everybody. I don't think that's a very interesting idea. Had the Kabbala already existed in some kind of oral form before Moshe de Leon had written the Zohar? So Moshe de Leon didn't write the entire Zohar. We now believe, or scholars now believe, that a circle of people with him at the center, sort of center and spokes. He's the center of it probably. But the Proto-Kabbalah had existed for about 100 years before the Zohar was written down. So if you think about the Sefer Bahir, which is really the first text of the Kabbalah as we know it, that text certainly had existed for about 100 years before the Zohar was being written down. So I would say that there were oral proto-Kabbalistic traditions that ultimately coalesced into the Kabbalah. But no, I don't think that there's no evidence that there was an oral Kabbalah that began with Shimon Bar Yochai and was ultimately revealed by that, like the way that some people in the Orthodox world claim. I don't think that those claims are. I don't think there's any evidence for those claims. What is your opinion on Israel-Palestine? Do you really think I'm going to do this? Come on, absolutely not. This is not a political channel. I'm not here to give my political beliefs. If you want my political beliefs, I'm happy to tell you them in private. I guess what I will say is that I have zero interest in ethnostates, and I have zero interest in religious gangsters. And so, ethnostates are a terrible idea, and religious gangsters are a terrible idea, and they deserve each other, unfortunately. Ugh. But no, all I hope for is that there is peace as quickly as possible, and that innocent civilians, on both sides are harmed as little as possible. Chas v'shalom. But no, I don't do politics on this channel. Like I said, I'm a very political person. If you want to get into my politics, they have them on my website, and you can ask me in private. But yeah, zero interest in getting into politics on this channel. All right. Do you believe that Christianity and Judaism can come to spiritual consensus on topics that isn't supersessionism, or the Christians are delusional? Sure. I think that I believe that I believe that ecumenical relationships between all the religions is certainly possible. Again, as long as it's built on a platform of tolerance, which again go back to that Enlightenment value of religious tolerance. I don't have any interest. I'm not metaphysically aligned with with spiritual religiosity that believes in gods and angels and demons and messiahs. I metaphysically reject all of that, but I don't have the least interest in judging people. None. I don't want to do that. I don't want to judge anybody's value based on their metaphysical commitments. That's a terrible thing to do. What I do want to do is try to understand the values they have because of their metaphysical commitments, and deepen my appreciation of that, so that I can respect them more as people. And so, this is a Reddit atheist who just like look down their nose at anyone who doesn't share the exact kind of militant atheism or whatever they believe in, um, or whatever. I think that's a dreadful one. It's miserable. It sounds miserable. Those people sound miserable. But two, just because someone doesn't share my metaphysical beliefs doesn't mean that I should think of them less than. That's a nightmarish way of believing, and so I don't do that. So yeah, I do think that there's lots of ways of having ecumenical and deeply important spiritual relationships with religions outside of yours that don't mean compromise and also don't mean judgment. I think that's possible, and but again, I do that all the time here. Do you think I don't believe John D was talking to angels. I don't believe that. I don't believe Edward Kelly was. I don't believe any of that. But that doesn't mean that I get to look down my nose at the experience they had and make fun of them or something. My job is to understand them on their own terms and present their worldview and how they encountered this on those terms without me judging it. That's not my job to judge it. And so I would say the same thing is true of any kind of encounter that we have with another that doesn't share our metaphysical beliefs. Um, all right. Let me scroll down and get some more of these super chats. Thank you guys. This is going. Are there better writings on Bruno than Yeats? Yes, all in Italian. Yes, they're all in Italian though. So that's the problem there. There's a huge industry of Bruno scholarship, but it's all in Italian. This is the. Do I have any insight or recommended authors on modern anti-Gnostic conspiracy theories? Um, People this is an idea that somehow Gnosticism and Hermeticism have given rise to wokeism, which is just the most laughably stupid. But I mean, like sometimes I just like, yeah, it just boggles my mind. It's just hilarious. So this is a very idiotic belief that's completely not substantiated by any historical evidence. Um, the way this argument allegedly works is that Gnosticism or Hermeticism influenced Hegel, and Hegel gave rise to Marx, and Marx put out all these ideas, wokest ideas, cultural Marxism, this great anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that people continue to believe in. So that's the argument that these folks put out. It's rubbish. It's intellectual trash. And so it's not worth my time. It's not worth your time. And I think you could get smarter by banging your head against a car windshield than listening to those people. Oh, Derek. Hey, brother. Hey, Derek. Derek's from the Myth Vision podcast, a fantastic podcast, folks. If you're interested in Bible and biblical scholarship, Derek has some great long form content and also has just fantastic interviews with scholars. I really admire what Derek does. It really, again, doing the work of bridging the gap between scholars and the wider population. It's work that I think is very important. Derek does a fantastic job of it. And again, folks, if you're interested in especially topics in biblical studies, Myth Vision podcast is one of the best shops for that on YouTube. Absolutely. Good to see you, Derek. Hope you're well, man. We should catch up sometime soon and do some work together on something. This is a great question. Across your research, what have you found most interesting or surprising? What are you currently researching? I mean, what I find the most interesting is that there's a lot more of this material than people think. A lot of people have the misconception that, like in the Middle Ages, they just burned all the magical books, and there are just no magical books, or like that. There's very little that survives, and the truth of the matter is, a lot survives. Now, a lot of it hasn't been properly cataloged or documented or written up or translated, but it's out there. It's out there in the libraries of Europe and some in America. So I think what's surprising is just how much there is. Sometimes people ask me, do I think I'll ever run out of topics for esoterica? And the answer is definitely not. I'll definitely not run out. I could do this for 300 years. God forbid that I would do that. I could do this for 300 years and still be doing more material. There's an enormous amount of material to be done. And so I think that's the big thing. Now, what am I currently researching? I'll come back to that in a minute. Around the hour mark, we'll talk about what I'm currently working on, because it's kind of a channel announcement. Hope. Yep. When is the episode on Mormonism? Yes, yes, it's coming. I don't know when. I got to find time to sit down and read that big long. What is it, the Magic in the Early History of Mormonism? I've started it and stopped it, and started and stopped it. I just need to get all the way through it. And once I do that, I know Peter Levanda has a shorter version of basically the same thing. But I want to get through that, and then I'll do it. I don't know when it's going to happen. Sometime this year, hopefully. Also, I want to get out to Salt Lake City when the big temple is going to be before it's sanctified. That's not the right word. Consecrated, maybe, because I really want to go into the big Salt Lake City temple before I can't, because I'm not LDS. And yeah, I'd love to tour around in there and see it, because again, Latter-day Saints movement, super interesting. But yes, it is coming. I am going to do it. I just got to find the time to get it done. Genghis, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. The 4JSs. Yeah, it's all kinds of crazy stuff that we do around here. But thank you for the super thanks. All right, so let me keep going, scrolling down. Wow, there's so many great comments. And just so you guys know, I do come back later after these live streams are over, and I do scroll through all the comments. So if I don't get to everything, I will try to at some point. Hi, Harry. It's a Patreon supporter. I really appreciate you being here, Harry. Good to see you. Thank you, James, for the super sticker. Appreciate that. Trustworthy English translation of the Zohar is going to be the Pritzker edition by Daniel Matt. So if you want to study the Zohar, you're going to want to study Daniel Matt's English translation. There's a little short volume he's also done, that sort of snippets of the Zohar, if you don't want to go all in and buy all 12 volumes or whatever of the Pritzker. But you can also get that small version. But Daniel Matt is going to be the guy that you're going to want to read the Zohar in. Explore the concept of the pleroma. Yeah, I don't know if it's an ontological analog for quantum entanglement. I'm not sure. Anytime I hear anyone mention religion and quantum mechanics in the same sentence, I basically stop listening at that point. I just don't think that. Yeah, I don't connect. Quantum mechanics is its own thing. In fact, I always tell people that if I see something about quantum mechanics and it doesn't have a bunch of math I don't understand, then I don't trust it. The less I understand about when someone's talking about quantum mechanics, and if I don't see a boatload of bracket notation, quit listening. But yeah, I want to do an episode on the concept of the pleroma. I want to do an episode on Noria. Noria is an important character in Gnostic mythology. The autogenes, the self-generated one. There's a lot of these little characters that appear in Gnostic mythology that are just interesting, that have their own personalities, their own quirks and stuff like that. Their own quirks. Sorry. But yeah, I do want to come back and do an episode on the pleroma, on Noria, on autogenes, on the allogenes, all these kind of minor characters. Sophia and Yaldabaoth and all these, they get all the airtime because people are interested in that mythology. And of course, that mythology is very interesting, but I think we've covered it quite well. and basically anyone who knows anything about Gnosticism kind of has a general idea of the demiurge and all that. Although I will say the demiurge is less understood than people think. They always think the demiurge is just the Apocryphon of John version, which is certainly not true. The Valentinians had a very different conception of the demiurge, which we'll get to in a later episode in the series on the demiurge. But yeah, more topics in Gnosticism for sure. Definitely want to do those. Let's see. Thanks, JM. Thank you. All right, still scrolling through. Fred RC, appreciate you as well. Another Patreon supporter. Yes, more Lovecraft. Yes, I am planning to do more Lovecraft. I'm actually going to submit a what do I call it? Abstract to the Necronomicon, the conference in Rhode Island. I'm going to hopefully go there this summer. I think I want to do an episode on alchemy in Lovecraft, how Lovecraft understood alchemy and how alchemy functions in his stories. In the case of Charles Dexter Ward, it plays an important role. It kind of also plays a role in Dunwich Horror. Also, the first story we have from Lovecraft, written during the juvenile period, is a story called The Alchemist. So, in many ways, alchemy was his kind of inroad, in some ways, into this more esoteric-y stuff. And so, yeah, I definitely am going to be putting together an abstract, and then eventually that abstract will become a presentation for the Necronomicon over in Rhode Island, in Providence, and then it'll become an episode as well. So, yep, more Lovecraft content coming this summer. All right. No, I'm not a James Lindsay fan. Nope. And I do consider him a conspiracy theorist. No, I'm not going to. I mean, again, I don't debate. Debates are debates over facts. This is the thing that I think are very important for people to understand. People who debate, like, this is the reason why I'd never debate like a race realist. I'm not going to debate a person who doesn't actually encounter, or a flat earther. I'm not going to debate someone who rejects facts, because that's actually not a debate. A debate is about how to settle facts. And once you've gone off the rails and you've developed nonsense history, I'm not going to me engaging with nonsense history legitimates it, and I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to. I'm not going to debating with a young Earth creationist somehow legitimates that they're worth talking to. They're not worth talking to, at least not from a scientific point of view. And so, in the same way, when someone engages in intellectual charlatanism, they're not worth talking to, because they're not playing the game. They're engaging in pseudo intellectual stuff, and if you engage with them, you legitimate them. And yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. All right. Probably can't. I probably won't do an episode on the Druze. Like I said, the Druze have been covered, I think, pretty well. Probably both on Let's Talk Religion and Religion for Breakfast. So I would check out those channels. Carl, you can find the explanation about the logo of the channel actually on my website. So if you want to read a little bit more about the history of the logo, absolutely check out my website, and you can find the answer there. All right, Mia, you have a very broad ambition, much broader than mine. If I could say, at least with Western Esotericism, the book that I would start off with is Walter Hanegraaff's Western Esotericism: A Guide to the Perplexed. I think it's a single best book to start off studying Western Esotericism. The bibliography of that book is just a gold mine. Basically, anything you want to study in the history of Western Esotericism, Hanegraaff is going to have. The bibliography is going to point you in those directions. But so I would start there. That would be my recommendation, is Walter Hanegraaff's Western Esotericism: A Guide to the Perplexed. I think he told me he's working on another edition of it. So it'd be great to see a new edition of it come out, because it's such a fantastic book. All right. Let's see. All right. Let's see here. Let's see. No, I've never read it. Again, this is like a place where my knowledge of contemporary esotericism is just so low. I just don't really read New Age stuff. I don't really read contemporary esotericism, unless it just so happen to know the author or something, where I know them, or I'm just kind of curious where modern esotericism is. But I know next to nothing. I've never read the book. I know next to nothing about sort of contemporary esotericism at all. So I haven't read it. Of course, it's important and influential, but I have not read it before. All right. Let's see. All right. Let me get down to make sure to get these super chats. Can you tell us a little bit about the different ways structuralism is framed in science versus philosophy? I don't know how it's framed in science, so I can't say there. But I can say that in philosophy, structuralism is a philosophical school that says that that differential relata, that relations of like different kinds of logical relations, are the fundamental building blocks of knowledge, which is havable, and that those structures are what we should be studying when we do philosophy. And so either they can be epistemological structures, metaphysical structures, they could be other kinds of structures. But the idea is that what we're looking at are networks of logical dependence and interdependence. And by analyzing those, we come to the truth. And there's lots of different versions of it, whether it's anthropology with Levi-Strauss or psychoanalysis with Lacan, which I like Lacan I like him in a general way. I think he's crazy in other ways, but so that's the basic idea. I don't know how it functions in science, but in general, it's the way it's framed in philosophy is as an analysis of structures of relata and in relata. Am I 44? I'm 43. I just turned 43 last month. Right. Good place to start for studying. Again, like I said, I would pick up Walter Hanegraaff's Western Esotericism, A Guide to the Perplexed, and just dig into that. Anything you want to study from there is going to be in the bibliography. I mean, you don't need to have a lot of money. You just need to have a library card. And if you get a library card, you can ILL almost every book that's going to be in there, and you can give yourself a world-class education in Western esotericism without having to spend much in the way of money. Do I believe in Kabbalistic mysticism? No. Do not believe in Kabbala. I like it. No, that's not true. I don't like Kabbala very much. I like Kodaver and Kabbala. I think that this is where I get into mistake. It's where I get into trouble with people with other Kabbalists. I think everything after Kodaver was a Titanic disaster. Lurianic Kabbala is a mess. I think Cordovero should have written the last book. The Partis Ramim should have been the last statement about Kabbalah, and we should have been done. I think that I think that Lurianic Kabbalah was just a disaster, and I think it led directly to Shabtai Tzvi. I'm very skeptical of it. I think it led directly into the gutter that was Shabtai Tzvi, and I'm very skeptical of it to this day. I much prefer the system of Cordovero. From an astrophysicist PhD, if you talk about quantum mechanics and don't see a bunch of bracket, yep, better ignore. You're absolutely right. I tell people when I see any talk of quantum mechanics that is not just a bunch of bracket and math, I'm like, well, this goes in the trash. So yeah, again, I'm not an expert in quantum mechanics by any stretch of the imagination, but there's so much nonsense that gets taken in with quantum mechanics and saddled with all kinds of pseudo spirituality. But yeah, if you don't see a bunch of a bracket notation and a bunch of math, into the trash it goes. All right. Thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate this. Thank you. Right. Alchemy and the birth of potable spirits. Yeah, that'd be a fun one to do. Actually, I I'm kind of going to do that actually in some way. Then the next content creation cycle, I'm going to be recreating a spagyric recipe from the 17th century that will involve potable spirits. So look for that on the next cycle. Have I debated anyone before? No, I don't like debates. I don't think they're effective. I don't think that I've never seen an effective debate. Never. I don't think they're effective. I think that the way that they're framed as kind of intellectual pugilism is counterproductive and toxic, frankly. Um, I think that most of the time debates are just about cheerleading the people that you like as part of your own like identity formation, and it's all about like what team you're on and how important it is it for you that you're on this team and you're not on that team and that team is bad. Um, I think that entire culture is toxic. I think it's actually counter real intellectual progress because it's not really they're pseudo debates for one because the moderation almost always is complete trash. Um, if I were a moderator in a debate, I would attach those shock collars that they use to like I don't know train animals with, God forbid. But I would attach a shock collar to the debaters. And the moment that one of them made a logical fallacy or intentionally was doing things like moving the goalpost, I would shock them. And every time they did that, they committed a logical fallacy or they did one of these kinds of things. They make fun of people. I would subtract time until they just had no more time to talk ever again. So yeah, I don't find debate culture, frankly, to be um, of any intellectual value. I've never seen much of intellectual value come out of it. Um, what I do think are important are conversations where the participants disagree about something important, and they work through that disagreement and they sharpen that disagreement, not in the interest of trying to like zing, gotcha, not in the interest of doing that kind of uh, pseudo intellectual pugilism, but having deep, extended, long conversations about why we disagree and what's possible given that disagreement, that's interesting to me. Zevi and I have had that conversation. We had a 3-hour long conversation around the relationship of logic and mysticism. Zevi and I really disagree about this. And it was a fantastic conversation where we were able to have some pretty deep disagreements where we still disagree about this. And I think that that's interesting to me. But debates, simplicator, especially like internet debates, I I've just not I've never seen any evidence of their efficacy. I've just and again, if we're going to be in a given some kind of data driven analysis of why we do what we do, and if the data don't indicate that they actually do things like change the intellectual climate or better the intellectual climate or deepen our understanding of a problem, then they're entertainment masquerading as intellectual stuff, but they're not. So no, I'm disinterested in that culture. Um, yeah, I'm disinterested in that culture largely. Um, all right. Can you give a source for more universalistic Valentinian sects? Um, the oh man, the best book on one of the best books on the Valentinians. It's not slipping my mind. It's a Brill book, so settle in. Let me see if I can find it real fast. It's like no, what is it? Oh, hold on. I don't even own it because it's so expensive. I had to get it on library loan. Valentinians. Um, the Spiritual Seed. This is it. Einar Thomason. The best book on the Valentinians as a church is what's called the Spiritual Seed. by Einar Thomason. That's the best book I've seen on the Valentinians. I'll throw it in the chat. So if you want a deep dive into their church, as much as it was a distinct church, that will be the best one in my opinion. It's a great book. Get it on ILL because it is really expensive and it is a real book. Hey Leland, thank you, brother. Appreciate the super sticker. So great question about the future of the channel. So I'll give a brief answer to this because I want to make sure to get some of the other super thanks and stuff. One of the things that I do see the channel evolving into or changing is I want to start doing more in-person stuff. I want to start interacting more with you guys in person and in in-person learning environments. I don't think that internet learning is ever going to be very deep. And I think that in-person learning is going to be much deeper. And so I want to start doing in-person, like weekend courses where I would come to New York or Seattle or the Bay Area and just basically settle in and do a whole weekend worth of study, like really intensive all day study, and do that in person. So that's a direction I want Esoterica to go in. The other direction I want Esoterica to go in is I want to start doing in-person learning abroad. Well, I say abroad for me, but I want to start I want to start doing what I would call in situ learning. Let's learn about the Kabbala, where the Kabbala was developed. Let's go to Girona in in Catalonia, and let's study the Kabbala there. Let's go to Paris and study the history of magic in Paris, where the main text of magic were being developed. So I want to do something like in-person learning based on geography. So that's a thing that I want to do. So that's a direction I think I'm going to start taking the channel probably next year. I'm going to do the first experiments with that, I suppose, in like 2025. So that is the direction I want to go. I want to start doing more in-person stuff. The question is always, how do I make that accessible and how do I make that work? And I don't know the answer to that, but I have some guesses and I have some ideas. So look for those kinds of stuff coming in the next couple of years. Of course, that won't replace what I do with normal Esoterica. That'll still keep happening, but it'll be in addition to. Yeah, thank you all for the super stickers and super chats. Yeah, like I said, they should let me moderate the presidential debates. I don't think either one of them would survive it, and we'd all be all the better for it. Thoughts on Yiddish Nigunim? Nigunim, folks, are the wordless songs that emerge primarily in the Hasidic movement, and any connection to Turfi is the Turkish or Sufi connections. I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know if there is a connection between Hasidic music and the rise of Sufism and Sufi music. I'm not an expert in music. This would be a great question for Philip. Philip is very interested in the overlap between music and religion. So this would be a great question for him. Is it true that the ubiquitous sigil of Lilith dates to no earlier than a Tumblr post from 2010? I have no idea. I've never seen a Lilith sigil in any historical document. So if I've never seen it in any historical, let me just check and make absolutely sure. I don't know of any historical book of magic or grimoire that has a sigil of Lilith. I don't know of any historical books of magic outside of Judaism in which Lilith even appears. Lilith is a exclusively Jewish myth from the time basically of the Talmud. Before that, obviously, she has her roots in Mesopotamian paganism. But by the time she becomes Lilith, as we understand her, as we get her in the alphabet of Ben Sirah and other texts, the incantation bowls and stuff, she primarily exists, at least in the Western world, exclusively in the Jewish environment. She survives a little bit in Mandeanism and stuff, but I don't think it's until the 19th century that that non-Jewish occultists begin to know anything about Lilith at all. And I think it's not until probably the 20th century that she emerges in sort of modern occultism in a strong way. But again, the 20th century is not my strong suit. Not my strong suit. Have I ever engaged tools? I guess there's a lot of Rallis. I've listened to that album 1,000 times. I was actually just listening to it the other day at the gym. Um, yeah, I always like the fact that there's some dialectic in Maynard and Tool, where on the one hand it's like juvenile like penis jokes, and then it's like platonic mysticism. Um, and that combination is really, I think, the best possible combination, where they somehow take these spiritual themes very seriously, but then it's just about like butt stuff randomly. Um, so I find that combination of like juvenilia and extremely important spiritual stuff really fantastic, and there needs to be more stuff like that. Um, Crowley had a knack for that too, being very scatological and very spiritual at the same time. I think that combination is fantastic. So, so yeah, I think that that's a great album. I love it. Um, Tool fans have an unfortunately well-deserved bad reputation, but I really appreciate Maynard and his sense of humor, and the mixture of scatological humor and spirituality in Tool is something I think is needs to be further exemplified, but I'm not sure anyone's going to do it better than them. All right. Dimitri, if I may ask, how does one combine being religious with a deep scientific knowledge of history of religion? Um, I think that we can have a much bigger sense of what being religious is. I think that often we let Christian hegemony define religion as the acceptance of a bunch of propositions, from which the acceptance of those propositions demands of one certain kind of practices. I think that's a totally Christocentric vision of what religion is. I think religion can be a much broader idea. I do think is in fact a broader idea that has very little to do about whether or not one accepts a series of propositions or creeds. And so I think that if you think of religion as broader, as a set of symbols, a set of rituals, a way of making meaning, a way of parsing time, a way of building and being in community, a way of again dealing with the meaning drought, the meaning famine that we're all very much mired in, then religion means something much more than, do you believe in God? Do you believe that Jesus is of one substance? Or do you believe that Moses got the Torah from Sinai? I think when we reduce religion to a bunch of propositions, we don't get a religion, we get a dogma. And I think that dogma can be important and useful and true even. But I think when religion is mere dogma, it dies. It just dies. Religion dies in that kind of dogma. And so I think that we can have a bigger tent idea of religion. I certainly do. That I don't have to believe that some guy went up on I don't have to literally believe that some guy went up on a mountain and got a bunch of rules, and that I have to follow those rules, because if I don't, I'm going to go to Gehenna or something. Um, I think that worked for a certain time period. It doesn't work now. And so I think the way that I combine them is by saying that they're different magisteria, to use the idea of Stephen J. Gould, that religion's answering certain kinds of questions, and science is answering different sorts of questions, and they don't need to overlap. They don't need to. They don't. One doesn't have to answer all the questions for the other. So so that's my answer in a very small way, that I think one can take. Again, I've said this many times on this channel. One can take one's religion very seriously without taking it literally. And I think that when religion is reduced to mere literalness, um, that's a dogmatic and probably dangerous religion. And that is definitely not the path that I want to take when it comes to me being religious. Um, all right. Grab some more questions. Um, oh, nice. He's in Redford. Oh, Jordan, well, you're not far away, are you? Just right up the road. You guys have that cool theater over there in Redford. Um, all right. Marco Visconti. Hey, Marco. LiveJournal, the true esotericism of the internet stuff. I remember the days of LiveJournal. I used to have a LiveJournal. In fact, I have a friend, Ted Hand, who I met on LiveJournal many, many years ago, and I still know him on the internet today. But yeah, Marco's giving us a date for 2007. Like I said, the most of Lilith stuff is really, really recent. I don't know. I've never gotten the fascination with her. I guess, but having two small children, a demoness responsible for like crib death is just like that's just not anything I'd want to have anything to do with. I remember, that fear that parents get where you have to like make sure your children are breathing, um, and you have to like you're kind of waiting them, waiting for see their little chest rise and fall. I'm like, that those sequences where you hear stories of that when children talk to themselves, they're actually talking to Lilith, and Lilith is going to, lead them out and drown them or something. Those stories are terrifying to me. I've never understood this bizarre um, idea that you're going to be friends with her. And even in the Zohar, she's a primordial entity, along with Samael. Um, if you take those stories seriously, which I imagine some people do, these are not forces that you want anything to do with. These are primordial, hyper malevolent forces that I can't imagine that just would destroy you and everything you love, like accidentally. I mean, they're Lovecraftian in some sense, and the idea that you're going to like summon them to like be your girlfriend, it's just like there's something just there's something that's interesting about that. It's in the sense that there's no way either they haven't read any of the Talmud, or they haven't read any of the Zohar, which is very likely, or they don't really believe it. And if they take these stories in any way seriously, I can't imagine anyone in their right mind. It's like summoning a mama bear who hasn't eaten in a few days into your house to be your friend. Like, yeah, it boggles my mind. Boggles my mind. And also, people like be real edgy about Samael, but they don't know that Samael's castrated and stuff. Like, yeah, I just like find it funny that they like, yeah, Samael. I'm like, yeah, in the Kabbala, Samael's like that's the reason why Lilith has to seduce men, is because Samael can't actually have sex with her. I'm like, really? It's like he's like a spiritually impotent, and he's like an incel. Like, really, is that your like go-to demon, like the incel demon? It's something laughable about that to me. Um, all right. Okay. Any recommendations for learning about shtetl superstitions and folk magic and spirits and Shadim and stuff, or the ancient conceptions of Ashmedai? Um, Jewish folk stuff is probably going to be in Trachtenberg. Um, Trachtenberg is really outdated now, unfortunately, but I don't know there's been a recent better book. So I would read, yeah, I would study Trachtenberg, and that'd be your best place for that kind of folklore stuff. Patai, P-A-T-A-I, not Batai, of the accursed chair. Patai is going to have a little bit about Lilith in his toward the end of his essay on Lilith. There'll be a little bit in there about her. That'll be more folk related stuff. But my guess is going to be Trachtenberg. It's going to be your best bet for that material. Although, like I said, it's dated, so you're going to take it. You're going to need to take it with a little bit of whatever, grain of salt or whatever. All right. I don't want to talk about her, but how many subs she got you? I literally made 2 episodes on Lilith. Of course I want to talk about her. I did 2 giant, like, long episodes about Lilith. I'm perfectly happy to talk about her. I just like have no. It boggles my mind why people would be Why people would want to be that fascinating. Like, I don't know. Why people would feel entitled to that kind of malevolence. But yeah, I do like, again, Samael is like, he's like an incel demon. I always think of Samael as like, yeah, no, I won't say that. But yeah, I always think of him as like a sort of impotent rage. That he has a castration complex. Like, he's classic. Like, he's the guy with the big truck, with like the truck nuts hanging from the back, and he's like driving really aggressively and cutting people off and like spraying all the black stuff. Like, that guy, that's Samael. And I'm like, yeah, I see all these edgy people are like, yeah, I'm some Samael. I'm like, he's just like a mean, impotent redneck. Like, why would you want to have anything to do with that? But it's funny. Alexavier, thank you for being transparent and definitively opaque with material. It is opaque. Do I think that the three mothers are reflective of Minoan triple goddess? I don't know. I don't know much about Minoan. I don't know that we know much about Minoan mythology because we can just barely read their writing. So I don't know much if those are connected. So I don't know much about Minoan mythology because I don't know that anyone does, and I know even less than that. But I don't know that the concept of the three mothers is connected to that. So sorry, I don't have a better answer for you there. No, Lord Roku, man, you're reading a lot of Philo of Alexandria. I'm sorry. I hope you get. God, reading Philo is so torturous. Reading the allegorical stuff, it's just the most. That is just the most tortured stuff to read. I'm sorry, but I hope you the best. And yeah, I mean, he does. He just says like, and Philo's just like, yeah, this is just all allegories. It's an all huge allegorical reading of what's going on. Yeah. Not everything like that is Philo wrote, but yeah, the allegorical stuff is a mess. How much was Judaism shaped by the Babylonian exile? I would say the Babylonian exile created Judaism. I think the joke I tell is that Israelite religion, Yahwism, went into exile and Judaism came back. But yeah, Judaism, the post-exilic period is what is Judaism. Prior to that is Israelite religion. In fact, the only people to keep the lights on of Israelite religion were the Sadducees. The Sadducees, people really hate on them. But if you want the actual conservative Israelites that really want to maintain very traditional Israelite beliefs, like the rejection of the afterlife, the rejection of angels and demons, which again, none of those appear in the Hebrew Bible, basically. If you want at some level to like be a true Israelite, then the religion you want to adopt would have been Sadducism. Sadducism is the closest surviving thing to the religion of the Hebrew Bible. Judaism is an innovation developed primarily in the post-exilic period, primarily after the Babylonian exile. So yeah, I always tell people, if you don't like Sadducism, then you don't like Israelite religion, because that's really the closest thing that survived, that sort of it existed after the exile. Lewis, have I ever experienced anything I would describe as supernatural? Not really. Not really. Not really. I'd like to. I can say that. And I've actually sought it out. I mean, I've gone to, places that are allegedly haunted, and places that have numinous energies and all these sort of things. And I slept like a baby, and I did not hear ghosts or see ghosts or anything like that. So, but I would, like I said, I would like to. Thanks, Flux. Appreciate you. I appreciate you. All right. Let me let me go ahead and make this announcement. It's already an hour and a half in. Let me make this announcement. So on the Patreon, and I'll say that on my Patreon, there's no paywalled content. All the content that I do is available to everybody. I don't do any paywall content at all, just because it doesn't align with the values that I have for the channel. And that's not to say that patrons don't have certain privileges. Of course they do. One of the privileges that they had was, I'm wanting to teach a class, and I gave them the option between basically two classes that I want to teach. One on Merkava mysticism, and one on Agrippa's occult philosophy. And I put a poll up, and Agrippa won by a decent margin. Now I'm going to do both of them because I want to do the Merkava one anyway. So what's about to happen is that starting probably in April, I'm hoping, is that there's going to be a class. If you like the Kabbala class, it's going to be basically like that. It's going to be college level, maybe even slightly above college level, maybe sort of graduate schooly. But it is going to be a seminar on Agrippa's occult philosophy, and it's going to cover all of Agrippa's occult philosophy. So we're going to look at Agrippa's influences that lead up to Agrippa. We're going to look at Agrippa's opera omnia. We're going to look at not just the 3 books. We're also going to look at some stuff that hasn't been translated, at least not translated into English. That does have Italian translations, but my Latin is better than my Italian. I don't have any Italian, frankly. And so his lectures on the Hermetica, his lectures on different ways of knowing God. It's going to be like an 8-week class, I think. An 8-week class on Agrippa's occult philosophy. And part of the reason why I want to do it is because I think people talk a big game about Agrippa. I don't think people really read him. And I definitely don't think people read him in the totality of what he wrote. People might read some sections of the 3 books, but they're not reading all of Agrippa. And I think that if you don't read all of Agrippa, you don't really understand what the occulta philosophia is. And what the class is going to be getting at Agrippa's occult philosophy. And that doesn't mean just the 3 books, because the 3 books are a complicated business. They're not the whole story, for sure. So it's going to be a class on Agrippa. It's going to be, I don't know what day, but what's going to happen, the way it's going to work is the lectures will go first to patrons who will be able to attend them live. They'll be there in person in Zoom. We'll have Q&A at the end of the lecture. So Patreon people will be able to the class will be more interactive in that way. But the actual lectures themselves will ultimately end up on the channel, and they'll be accessible to everybody. So it'll be a free class, university level seminar on Agrippa's occult philosophy, mostly because I think he's so important and so influential, and at the same time, I think not really studied. I think that, like Voltaire said of the Bible, he's more celebrated than known. And so I really want people to get to know Agrippa, because I do think he's crucially important for the history of Western esotericism. In fact, I don't think there is Western esotericism the way we recognize it without him. And so starting in April, we're going to have a whole class just on Agrippa's occult philosophy. The first couple lectures are going to be framing his influences and his life, and then we'll go from there. So I hope folks are looking forward to that. I hope that folks would be interested in a class on Agrippa. I think he's important. I think he matters greatly. We're going to be using the Eric Purdue translation of the 3 books. So if you want to pick it up, that's a good reason to pick it up. It's a great translation. So, but any translation's fine. I'll say that the Donald Tyson one is not great. There's some really serious problems with that translation, and problems with the notes. But yeah, any of the 2 recent translations of Agrippa would be good. So that's what's coming in April. We're going to have a class on Agrippa. And again, patrons, the good thing about being a patron is you can attend the class live, and but everyone will get access to the material for free. Again, one of the through lines of this channel, one of the big commitments we have, or I have rather, is accessibility. And I don't want it to be the case that a financial barrier makes it such that learning the class, or taking the class, learning from the class will be difficult. So look forward to like I said, probably 8-week series, 8-week class coming up soon, probably in April, on Agrippa's occult philosophy. So hope that's interesting. And I think next year might do the Merkava one. Might do the Merkava one next year because I definitely want to do it because the Merkava mysticism stuff is just so important and so interesting. All right, let me get a last couple of questions. And yeah. Would you do psychedelics in the interest of spiritual experience? I have done psychedelics in the interest of, I don't want to say spiritual experience, but experience. Sure. I think psychedelics are one avenue. I think often a very overhyped avenue of a vehicle by which to attain spiritual experiences. I think that discipline and work are a far better way of doing it. Historically, I think that's been borne out. But yeah, I'm very pro the responsible use of psychedelic drugs in a variety of settings, including religious settings. Um, there's long been an anti-psychedelic bias, and I think that's stupid and counterproductive. Hi, Vera. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. It's great to got to meet Vera in Amsterdam. Super sweet person, very kind. Vera, I actually have the yarmulke that you made for me right over there. I was wearing it just the other day, actually, and I thought of you. So know that the yarmulke that you made for me, very very kind, very sweet, is helping to keep me humble. So just know that it is doing the task. Um, all right. Are you familiar with the FromSoft games? I've heard a lot about this. That Elden Ring and other kinds of games like this have a lot of esoteric elements they implement into the game. I've heard they do a good job. I haven't played them just because I don't have the time. But I hear that they do a great job. And if they ever, and again, if they're ever watching Esoterica and they ever want anyone to help consulting for the games, they should absolutely reach out because I love the idea of video games, which I think are a great thing. I think video games are fantastic. I honestly wish I had more time to play them, but I think it's fantastic when video games do a great job of incorporating history and philosophy and esotericism into the games as a mechanic or a storytelling device. And when they do that with intellectual rigor, I'm impressed, and I really think that's it's great. I know that some people sort of get down on video games, but I don't have that opinion. I think video games are they can be fantastic, but like everything else, they can be used in moderation. Do you have any opinion if the religion of the Semitic kings of Lower Egypt in any way influenced Judaism? Do you mean like the Hyksos, like Semitic kings of Lower Egypt? I don't think so. I mean, I think that there was a lot of cross-cultural exchange, but I think that the main way Egyptian Egyptian religion probably influenced the development of Israelite religion was primarily as a thing. We don't do what they do, as a negative influence more than a positive one. But no, I don't think there's any connection between Akhenaten and Moses, or Akhenaten and the rise of Israelite monotheism. Frankly, because Israelite monotheism developed Akhenaten's like 13th century BCE. Israelite monotheism doesn't develop until the post-exilic period in like the like 5th century. So you're talking about hundreds of years, 800 years later. So the idea that Akhenaten developed monotheism and therefore somehow infused that to Israelite religion just fundamentally misunderstands the historical reality of Israelite religion. And you see this this idea gets pumped out in all kinds of like rubbish Gaia nonsense, like I don't know, all that kind of stuff. And even what's his name, Freud flirted with this. And what it just reveals is that people who tout these ideas just don't understand that the Israelites just weren't monotheists until much later in Israelite history. In fact, I'm going to be doing the next episode, kind of a sequel to the episode I did on Yahweh, is going to be how Yahweh ended up being the only God, how Israelite monotheism developed, and it'll be an episode on the first one's kind of how Yahweh became God, and the next one will be how Yahweh became the only God. And so it'll be the development of Israelite monotheism, and that'll be the next sort of sequel to the episode on Yahweh. Do you know if anyone has done a video about Harry Houdini and psychic mediums? That's a great question. I really admire Harry Houdini and the work he did on so-called mediums. I don't know of any great episodes about it. I'm sure there has to be a lot. I mean, it was a big part of Houdini's kind of career was debunking these pseudo psychics, and it eventually drove a rift between him and his good friend Sir Conan Doyle, Arthur Conan Doyle, whose wife was a trance medium, and Houdini really thought it was all rubbish, and it drove a line. It really drove a rift between them as friends. It may have even gotten him killed. There's some reason to believe that he may have been the guy that punched him. May have been. I don't know if I really believe that. I probably don't. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic thing. It's not. It's kind of outside the purview of the channel because it's so recent. But it's interesting. You know, Houdini died here in Detroit. The funeral home that had his body in it after he died. It's empty now. It's an abandoned building. And it's right in Midtown Detroit. And I keep thinking someone should buy that and turn it into like the coolest, like magic bar, like a magic themed um, cocktail bar or something. But yeah, the funeral home that held his body is an empty building here in Detroit. Um, how can you sign up for the class? It'll be on the channel. It'll just be like regular episodes of. There'll be episodes that come out. I don't know which day they'll come out, but it'll just be on the. It'll be, if you want to watch it for free, it'll be there on the channel. But if you want to uh, sign up for Patreon to actually be in the class while it's happening live, then you just sign up for my Patreon and it'll be over there. Thank you, C0 super sticker. Let's see. I've got a couple questions. Are there any ancient texts that keep you up at night? Yes. Parmenides has kept me up late at night. In fact, maybe you guys will appreciate this story. When I was working on that week when I did the episode on Parmenides, I spent a good bit of time thinking about how to formalize Parmenides' argument, because I think that, I mean, do I believe this? I pretty closely believe that any argument that can't be formalized is rubbish, and so I'm pretty committed to the idea that arguments should be formalized if at all possible. And I'm a big fan of analytic philosophy for this reason. I wouldn't consider myself an analytic philosopher, but when they're right, they're right. And I was considering a lot of how to formalize Parmenides' arguments. And there was a moment where I was like laying up at bed at like 3 o'clock at night in the morning, just laying in bed in the dark, and just sort of like looking in my mind. I have a kind of, I see, and when I'm thinking, I'm a visual thinker. And so I was seeing all the logical operators, and eventually I saw them all kind of come together, and like, I'm like, that's it. That's the actual formal structure of the argument. And so Parmenides trying to formalize, and then I went to sleep and I woke up and I wrote the formalization out that morning, like, and I wrote it out like in ever how many steps it was. So yeah, that kind of stuff keeps me up, but not like how many hypotheses of the one there are. That just stuff doesn't bother me. Yeah, a bunch of henads and Proclus is not going to keep me up. But yeah, whether an argument is valid or not, that will keep me up. That will keep me up. Any sources on the Gez Apocrypha? I don't know. I don't really do a lot of work with Gez texts. I guess you're thinking like Book of Enoch and maybe the Kabbala Nagast and stuff like that. The Book of Enoch can be best found in the 2-volume pseudepigrapha, Old Testament pseudepigrapha. That's the best place to find that. That has a bunch of other Gez texts in there as well. I don't know what the best edition of the Kabbala Nagast is, but I could find it out for you. But you could probably find it out too. Just start looking for the best critical edition of the text. Thank you, Gavo. How do you feel about the Black Israelites, like the Black Hebrew Israelites? I think they're obnoxious and wrong, but they should have their religion and they should be allowed to do their religion. And again, if they want to, if they I know they find Tel Arad to be a certain important place, and they should be able to access it as anyone else should be able to access important religious sites. But they are obnoxious and wrong. Um, um, would you say there's a lot of inaccessible original source material sitting out there that they won't digitize or release? I won't say that they won't do it. It's just they can't. They don't have the resources. I mean, if you think about the Bibliothèque Nationale, who knows exactly how many manuscripts are in the Bibliothèque Nationale? Easily tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands even. The time it takes to catalog and the time it takes to scan that stuff and the time it takes to translate it, it's just a labor problem. And so I wouldn't say that the Vatican, and we know the Vatican and the Bibliothèque Nationale, they're not sitting on a bunch of manuscripts and like, yeah, we're not going to let them get out because they're about summoning demons. One, I don't even know that they know that they're there. And two, it's just a part of the history of philosophy where historians are not that interested in that stuff. And how many people out there can read medieval manuscripts, then read Latin, then know the history of Western esotericism, and then produce a critical edition of them? I can tell you how many people there are out there that can do that. There are 5. And that's why you see Claire Fenger and Veronese and those people that put out those editions. That's the reason why you see their names over and over and over again. It's because they're the only people on the earth that can do it. I mean, I could probably help a little bit, but that's not my job. So no, it's not that they're inaccessible because of they're being hoarded because they're spooky or something. They're inaccessible just because they haven't got the time and the energy to digitize them all and do it. But I'll say that a lot of them are digitized. For instance, I think I mentioned earlier that I'm working on, for this week's episode, I'm working on Bibliothèque Nationale 7337, which is a fantastic book of magic. All kinds of cool magical texts. And in fact, it's like I said, I'll be working on one particular text. I'll throw it in the chat. That's scanned. It's not a great scan. It's not very high resolution, honestly, but you can read it. If you read Latin, it's certainly accessible. So that's a great example of a magical manuscript that I think is right there on the Bibliothèque Nationale's website. They're not hiding it, but how many people are interested in or even know about, Antony of De Monte Olmi? I bet there's probably 50 people in the world that know about him. And so they just don't know he even exists, much less to know to go to a medieval manuscript to look at it. So I think it's not a political will problem. It's a capacity problem. Any books on esotericism and architecture? That's a great idea. I don't know of any, but I would love to read that book. There has to be something. I don't know, but that's a fantastic topic. That'd be a fantastic topic. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. Have you ever heard about ontological mathematics and Pythagorean Illuminati? I have never heard of this. I mean, ontological mathematics. I mean, no. I mean, what's his name? French Maoist dude. Oh God, I can't remember. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Oh, what is his name? I keep want to say Jean Baudin. It's obviously not that. Badiou. Badiou, Alain Badiou. Badiou has this belief that set theory is ontology. That set theory is ontology. I don't know what to make of that, but he does work on sort of a Platonized version of set theory. So that's interesting, I suppose. I don't know. I can make heads or tails of it. Almost every time philosophers deal with mathematics, they muck it up. Same with physics. Jaina, did you convert, or was it has always been your religion? So I am somewhere in the middle. My mom is Jewish, and I didn't know that I was Jewish until like I was 12, and my mom was like, "Hey, you're Jewish," and so I called the synagogue, and you're going to go meet with the rabbi and sort your identity out, I suppose, which is a hell of a thing to do to a 12-year-old. And so I started the process of sorting out that identity, and that's been the process I've been doing ever since. Still sorting it out. Did Paracelsus and Agrippa know of each other's work? I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah, it's interesting who knows about who at a given time. Like, there's no, like Bruno and Dee lived at the same time. There's no evidence that they ever interacted. They never interacted. How many languages did you need to achieve fluency to be a competent esotericist? I don't know how many to be a competent esotericist, because I'm not an esotericist. But I think if you want to study esotericism, I mean, as many as you can, at least Latin. At the very bare minimum, Latin. But again, it depends on which period of time you're working in. If you're working in 20th century stuff, then you can get by in English, French, and German. If you start doing stuff in the 16th century, then yeah, you're going to want to pick up some vernacular. Like, there's books, the Livre d'Esprit. That's a book of necromancy written in French. Paracelsus is written in German. So it depends on when and what you want to work in. Almost everything that I work in is medieval and early modern, so I get by in Latin just fine. But again, if you want to do Arabic stuff, if you want to do Sufism, obviously Hebrew and Aramaic, if you want to do Kabbala. So it all depends on what kind of esotericism and when in esotericism you want to really double down on. So I would say that it's the when and the where matter more than anything else. All right. Thoughts on Claude Shannon? That's a very sort of like information theory, random information theory question. I don't have any thoughts on Claude Shannon at this right now. Aside from, I'm going to do an episode on Trithemius at some point, and the episode on Trithemius is I'm going to make an argument that I think Trithemius is sort of a precursor to Shannon. I think that Trithemius understood a kind of primitive. He had developed a kind of primitive version of information theory, and so I'm going to make the argument that we get a kind of esoteric information theory in the thinking of Trithemius, especially in the Stenographia. So it won't be directly related to Claude Shannon information theory, but it will be very much informed by what Claude Shannon did and the idea of packets, quantized bits of information. I think that idea actually is at some level pioneered by Trithemius. So I will come back. I will come back to information theory in an esoteric way when I finally get to Trithemius. All right. Yes, I'm aware of I'm aware of the Shakespeare stuff, all that Francis Bacon. It's all nonsense. It's just like pareidolia gone crazy. Yeah, it reminds me of like kooky people that find patterns in like cookbooks and they can develop a CIA conspiracy out of it. Yeah, all the Shakespeare code stuff just strikes me as like pareidolia gone totally off the rails. It does not strike me as the least bit interesting or compelling. All right. Yeah, I that stuff. Yeah, I don't. It's like the Bible code people. Like they convert all the Torah into just grids, and then they go looking for crossword puzzles to overlap this, that, and the other. Yeah, it's interesting, but it's interesting as an exercise in pareidolia, but not actually as actual scholarship. All right. All right, a couple last things before I wrap up for today. Are there any shows or podcasts that you're really into right now? I don't listen to any podcasts. I don't like podcasts. You may find that ironic considering this is my job, but I don't listen to any. I don't like podcasts at all. I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know how people can get into podcasts. Any shows? We just watched the most recent season of True Detective, which I thought was pretty good. Um, so I watched that. But yeah, what shows have we got into recently? I watched. I just think I don't watch a lot of yeah, like what was the last shows that we watched? True Detective, The Gilded Age. I love like stuff like that. I love The Gilded Age. I'm a sucker for these like basically soap operas, but that's about it. But yeah, I don't listen to any podcasts. Uh, and even like aside from my friends, I don't even watch much in like religion tube. I mostly watch them because they're my friends and they make great content, but I don't do much in the way of religion tube or the YouTube content I like to watch are like technical content about like the 6502 processor. I'm like really interested in like assembly for the 6502 or something. That's the kind of stuff that I watch on YouTube. It's not other stuff. I don't watch any other esoteric content. All right, a couple more. Manly P. Hall once said, "Myth and legend are the history of prehistory." What do you think of that? Uh, I don't even know what that means. It sounds really profound. It's sometimes saying I can't tell the difference between profundity and nonsense. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's also just presumptuous to talk about prehistorical people as if we have any idea about what they thought. Like we don't know what the Göbekli people thought, or Göbekli Tepe, or Stone Age people thought, and what are the odds, right? The odds are we're going to sort out what they thought, or we're going to project upon them our prejudices and beliefs. I think it's much more likely the latter than the former, and so I think it's fun to speculate about it, but I think it's very um, very baseless speculation in a lot of cases. Um, I do know Clement of Alexandria. Would I do a video on Clement? I don't know. It would have to be something particular about Clement. It wouldn't be just an episode about a patristic father. I mean, Clement's obviously very important, but I don't think I'd do a general episode on Clement of Alexandria. I mean, I only covered um, Irenaeus because of his connection to Gnosticism. So I don't know if I would do one on Justin Martyr. I mean, I might do one on Origenism, because Origenism becomes a heresy later, and so maybe something on Origenism, but even that's kind of stretching it. But I don't know anything. I don't know particularly about if I would do one on Clement. All right. Yeah, I mean, esoteric religious text for someone learning Greek. I mean, Proclus. I mean, you need Plotinus. No, that's not true. Don't read Plotinus. He's a terrible writer. Proclus is clear. Proclus's commentaries on Plato are beautiful and clear. Um, so that's good for learning Greek, because then you get a little bit of academic later Greek, and then you get a little bit of the older Attic stuff. So that would be good. Um, can you speak some Latin? Why? I don't really speak Latin. You should go hang out with what's his name? Luke Ranieri. That dude speaks Latin. It's amazing. I love that guy. It's like I love listening to him speak Latin. But I guess I could say something in Latin, but I don't know why I would do that. What do I think about the bicameral mind? I think it's fascinating and probably wrong. I don't even think Julian, what's his name, even thought it was true. I think he just had a thought and wanted to kind of track it out to see if it worked. It's a fascinating idea, but I don't think it's true, and I don't think we could ever even show it's true. It's not a scientific. It's not a scientific theory. It's basically a speculation that he moves up. But it is interesting, and I do think it was done well in the first season of Westworld. So yeah, so I think that's fascinating stuff in that way. Um, all right. All right, folks. I think I am going to wrap up. Yeah, I guess what I'll say as we wrap up is just first, um, no, Plotinus is a terrible writer. He's a genius as a philosopher, but he's a terrible writer. In fact, in the introduction to it, Porphyry even apologizes for how bad of a writer he is. Um, yeah, being a genius philosopher doesn't make you a good writer, and definitely Plotinus is an example of that. Everybody, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me. Again, I want to thank all the women in the world, all of the women. And I want to say again, happy International Women's Day, happy International Working Women's Day. We often leave off that very important proletarian part of that story. Thank you, Clara Zetkin. But yeah, I want to say, thank you for all of for the women in this world who do all the amazing things that y'all do. And again, I'm looking forward to getting back to doing some more content on women in the history of esotericism. That's a very important and I think topic that does not get covered enough. But I guess lastly, what I just want to say is what I say every time, and because I really mean it, and I think it should be stressed that I'm extremely grateful to be able to do the work that I do. And I'm very yeah I'm very glad to be able to do this work, and I do it thanks to y'all. And so I just want to express my deeply felt sincere gratitude for all the support that I get, whether that's through Patreon or buying t-shirts or just leaving kind comments or hanging on a live stream. All of it matters. It's all part of the totality of making esoterica possible. And I'm just extremely grateful for that and for y'all. Like, you guys are just cool people, and the fact that you choose to spend time with me and learn with me this amazing material is extremely humbling. And I don't take it for granted, and I don't think that I don't think creators could exist without their. And I don't like to say word audience, because I this is why I love to have these live streams, so we can like interact in some kind of way. So at any rate, um, thank y'all. It's really a blessing to be able to do this work, and it's only because of the support and the the watching that you guys do, the content interacting. So that said, I'm going to go get ready for a little bit of Shabbat. Got some reading to do. A little bit of translating to do. I'm going to translate and read a little bit more of 14th century Astral Necromancy, which is going to be the topic of next week's video. Yeah, be a little on the lookout for the Agrippa class, which is going to be firing up here in the next month or so. So I'm looking forward to doing some Agrippa with you guys and learning about Agrippa with you. And aside from that, thank you. Thank you very much. Take care of yourselves. And again, if you observe the Sabbath, I hope you have a restful Sabbath. And if you don't, I hope you also have a restful weekend. Everyone deserves to have some rest and relaxation. And yeah, thank you guys very much. And I'll see you next week for a new episode, 14th century Astral Necromancy.